guys, welcome to Capital Edge Midweek. This is episode 8, which when you think about it means that we've been doing this for 8 months now. So it's great to have you with us. Great to be sharing. Our theme for this month is fruitfulness really matters, and we'll get onto that very shortly. But before we do that, I just want to introduce to you our panel today. We've got a couple of special guests here, so let me introduce them to you. First, we've got next to me here, we've got Ros Kirk. Hi, Ros. How you doing?
Great, thank you, John.
Fantastic. And we've got her husband, Martin. Martin, how you doing?
G'day, John. How you doing?
And these guys were having an argument a few minutes ago because they didn't colour coordinate. So
Sorry.
That would be my fault.
And of course, we've got Grace as well, our kids pastor. Grace, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Great. We're going to talk a little bit before we get into our fruitfulness topic. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19, which is one of the reasons why I wanted Martin and Ros to be here today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. First to you, Martin. For those of you that don't know, Martin is now let me get this right, you're a professor of epidemiology, is that correct?
That's correct, John.
Now, for all of those who don't understand what that means, can you explain to us what that's about?
Well, certainly a year ago, nobody knew what an epidemiologist was.
Yeah.
They thought it was a doctor of skin. But it actually comes from the word epidemic. And so it's really study of diseases upon the people. And so it's how diseases spread and are transmitted in the community and how to stop it.
Okay, so when we're talking COVID-19, we're talking to someone like you who's really, in a lot of ways, at the forefront of dealing with this. And what has been your involvement in this process?
Well, COVID-19, I normally work on foodborne infections, so things like Salmonella, Campylobacter. But at the beginning of the year in January, just after the bushfires, the National Incident Room contacted me. I used to work at the Federal Department of Health, and the National Incident Room's there. They contacted me and asked if I'd come in and assist. And so since that time, I've been in the National Incident Room, which coordinates a lot of the surveillance and response to COVID-19 around the country. All of the main responsibilities for dealing with actual investigations and infections are in the state and territories, but we have a very important national coordinating role, so we tell the national story. We coordinate the national guidance on how public health units should respond. So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 months.
Wow, and I know that you had some involvement with the Diamond Princess saga. What was your role in that?
Yeah, well, the Diamond Princess, there's been quite a few princesses that have caused COVID outbreaks.
Yep.
But the Diamond Princess was a cruise ship that was cruising around Japan and Hong Kong and other parts of Asia. And it was one of the first places we had a big outbreak of COVID-19. And there were many different nationalities on board, and many of the countries decided when the ship was put in quarantine in Japan to repatriate their citizens. Yep. And so they were brought back to Australia. It was one of the first lot of repatriated Australians, and so they were brought to a quarantine facility in Darwin, and I went up there as part of an AUSMAT team, which is a medical assistance team, and my role there was to actually look at the testing data and make sure people were that we were understanding how people got infected. So we conducted an investigation in how they got infected on the ship and to manage infection control and all of that kind of stuff.
Wow. So, well, Martin, I did want to thank you for all of your involvement, and I know that you plus thousands of other people are involved in all sorts of capacities to try and eradicate this thing and get to the foundation of what it is so that we can deal with it. So thank you for what you're doing. But I wanted to ask you this particular question. I've been just looking and hearing from certain Christians and looking at their posts and so on. And it seems to me there's a lot of people out there that are going down the line of this is some sort of conspiracy. And I've heard things said like the statistics of of death and all that are no different from, just the normal flus, and it's just that's never been reported on in the past and so on. So I wanted to get someone who actually does know something rather than someone who's heard something on Facebook from someone to tell us, where do you stand on this, and what would you say to the conspiracy theorists?
Well, yeah, I've seen some of those posts as well, and it kind of distresses me actually. Because I work on this stuff and it's my day job. We spend all day long dealing with COVID-19 and its repercussions.
Yep.
So, for example, in the aged care facilities, if you get an outbreak of COVID-19, there might be 10 or 15 deaths out of a residential aged care facility of maybe 150, 200 people, and that's really a huge consequence. So it's very different to flu.
Yeah.
It's much more infectious, and it's also much more severe in terms of its outcomes, particularly for elderly people. So the case fatality rate, or the proportion of people that die that get it, is between 2.5% to 3%, whereas for influenza in a normal year it's under 1%. But it's much more infectious. We've had 25,000 cases in Australia to date, and about 690 deaths. But you've got to remember, we've prevented hundreds of thousands of cases and tens of thousands of deaths. If we had have just decided, let's not have mobility restrictions and social distancing and all of those things that Australian communities worked really hard for, we would be in a very different situation. And there are other countries like that.
Yeah.
And we sort of think, it's only older people, but they are our mothers and our brothers and our sisters and our uncles and aunts.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily ready to die, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so you would be the first to say this isn't an overreaction to the situation?
No, I don't think so. I think if you look at all these countries around the world, many of them have taken different approaches, but they've all struggled to get the balance right. And I think we've had to do that too. And we've been seen as very successful internationally. And one thing that is clear, people say, well, if we didn't have these lockdowns, we would be in a better economic state. Well, countries that control the infections have been shown to be in a much better state economically. If you chart the effect on the economy versus how well the infections are being controlled, it's pretty much universal. If you control the infections well, your economy is less impacted.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
it's because
point.
of all the flow-on effects.
Yeah, that's great. Ros, let's bring you into this. I know that, Ros, you're a palliative care nurse.
Yes.
And you also train nurses as well in palliative care?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in palliative care for many years, and more recently my main role is to train primary health care providers in palliative care.
Okay, I remember it was probably 2 or 3 years, no, probably more so. I remember going to Clare Holland House and seeing you in action with a patient that I was visiting.
Yes.
And I just admire what you guys do, and dealing with the stresses and dealing with all that sort of stuff, terminal illnesses, and helping not just the patient but the families through those sorts of things. You guys do a remarkable job.
Thank you, John.
And so I really do appreciate all that you do. But you were saying earlier on too, and I wanted to talk to you about this because this brings in the COVID aspect as well. You also work with the Indigenous, and in particular the Indigenous in New South Wales, and we know that the Indigenous people are vulnerable. And so a lot of people don't understand that vulnerability. Can you explain a little bit about that to us? Why are our Indigenous people more vulnerable to COVID than other people?
Yeah, sure. So like all infectious diseases, it affects different parts of the population differently.
Yep.
And with COVID, it's been shown and demonstrated by data that they've collected since the beginning of the pandemic that different groups have higher hospitalisation rates and higher case fatality rates. And At the moment, thank God, in Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community haven't been affected by
Yeah.
the COVID-19 pandemic due to the lockdowns and the public health measures and restrictions that have been put in place.
Great.
But it's not hard to anticipate that if COVID did get into the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, that it would have a huge impact on the
Yeah.
community. And that's because there are other factors that they carry during their life, and that's seen in other disease rates such as heart disease and cancer disease and mental health and things like that.
Yep.
So they're
Yep.
vulnerable to infection.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good for people to know that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
now, obviously, you two are married, and
Yes.
how long you guys been married?
Well, it's
come on, Martin, it should come out
It's
like
27 years.
How many?
27.
Wow, fantastic. And the reason I said that was, both of you carry very stressful, full-on jobs.
Yeah.
In many ways, if not on the front line, definitely supporting the front line with this whole thing. How do you guys cope? I mean, how do you cope with the pressures? And when you get home, you get family. I know you got 3 kids, and how do you cope with all of it? What do you do to make sense of all this situation?
Well, it's interesting you say we're not on the front line, John. I've been thinking a bit about this, and I know you're an AFL fan. And is the back line important?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I might be the back line. Ros is probably middle line, and
Yeah. Everyone's
yeah.
contributing. So.
Look, I think fruitfulness is, it can be really difficult at times, particularly, and certainly these last 6 to 8 months had a huge impact on our family.
Yep.
Working really long hours, and we're not the only people doing that.
Sure.
But and we've seen a lot of my friends who work in state and territory health departments. They're no longer working on COVID because they've burnt out, and so that's a really big issue. Is people spend 7 days a week, 16 hours a day at work because we have never seen an outbreak like this.
Yep.
Last time we saw something like this was 1918.
Wow.
For the Spanish influenza.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it has had huge consequences. I try to keep my powder dry and only work hard when it's absolutely necessary, but it's still been very stressful. What would you say, Ros?
Yes, it has been very stressful. A part of my role, I was seconded to oversee the response to Claire Holland House with the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we were working very long hours, and I think really because of our pre-existing foundation in trying to keep our life healthy and balanced, when this happened, we really just went into survival mode. But I think that includes a couple of really important factors, and for both of us, I think there is absolutely our faith and our foundation that Jesus is our rock and our anchor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And while this storm has been happening around about us, that whether that be through reading the word or prayer or attending church in some sort of form, and every different day might be a different one of those things that will bring us back to some sort of centre.
Yeah.
But for both of us, we are both exercise pretty much every day. And at the very least, we will go for a walk. And I think, again, that really grounds us and centres us. And really, for me, when I'm out running, is often my best prayer time and my best time of reflection and just gathering my thoughts or quietening my thoughts.
That's great.
Yeah, I think exercise is a really big key. I mean, we're in a church, so we do absolutely stand by scripture and prayer and going to church, but exercise is pretty key.
Yeah.
I think both of us exercise is a daily thing for us,
Yeah.
except for the weekends for me.
Yep.
Roz doesn't stop, but I do.
But I think there's very clearly in Scripture there's the physical, which affects the emotional, which affects the spiritual, and so I think they're all connected. And I know you guys in particular are quite outdoorsy people. I know you enjoy hiking and camping and kayaking and all those sorts of things that I know you've done in the past. And I think that's a real key. You know, while you feel restricted, there's still that opportunity to get out there and, you know, experience nature, you know, and just breathe in and, you know, so I think that's crucial. What about you, Grace? What are some of the things you do to cope with your levels of stress in this world at the moment?
Similar kinds of things. So, I guess ensuring that I have quality time with the people that I love, not
Yeah.
just talking about work or what happened, eating dinner, going to bed, and that's it. But yeah, quality time with the people I love, devotional life for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, eating well, sleeping, exercising. We're talking about fruitfulness, and that was one of my keys to fruitfulness is that, a tree won't grow without fertile soil, water, sun, being in the right place. And it's
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
unless we take care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, well, then when we won't be as fruitful as we could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I was to pick one of my keys, it's just being around family. I think family is just so important, and I know that we often get together on a weekend somewhere. The whole family gathers around. We have a meal together. We play board games and do silly things or watch a movie together. And I think that sort of stuff just keeps you sane.
Yeah.
And so I think family is just such a wonderful gift from God as well. Some other keys. Any other keys that you can think of in regards to how that it helps you maintain or keep fruitfulness in your workplace, in your family life, in your everyday life?
Well, I have a sort of a common prayer. I think it's something that I pray all the time, and particularly when I'm going to work, it's really just asking for God's favour and the favour of men and women. So it is it's not just about God's favour, it's about the people you're working with. And
Yeah, that's good.
And
yeah.
for me, and I just have to trust that, because I know there are many times I don't do the right thing, or I haven't done things perfectly, but I have to just trust that God will direct my footsteps.
Yep.
So I might make my plans, but He directs my footsteps
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
small detail. He does care about the small detail of our
Yep.
daily life.
Fantastic.
I think for me is one of the keys to fruitfulness is getting out of my comfort zone. And so some of the times I've been most fruitful in my life are the times when I've taken that leap of faith, not stayed in the comfort and the easy, but just stepped out and gotten out of my comfort zone, gotten out of what was easy for me. And they're the moments where I've seen the most fruit in those areas, whether it's in ministry or personal life. And so sometimes you just have to make the decision and go, I'm going to go with the harder option.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What about you, Roz? Any ideas?
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think just building on what Grace has said, that often we need God the most when we can do the least.
Yeah, that's good. I
Yeah.
like that.
And so when we feel ill-equipped, then we are forced to ask God for direction and help and strength and patience and wisdom and
So true.
insight. But
Yeah.
if we don't step forward, if we don't hold on to things a bit, we're never going to be put in that place. And God grants us or creates desires and visions and gives us talents and for a reason, and that's for us to follow our dreams. God places those within our heart. And for me, for palliative care, that was something, a desire that happened when I was at university. And that hasn't been easy to follow. And there's been many times where I've really wanted to step back. But because that was something that I did with God,
That's
there's
awesome.
no reason
That's
at this
awesome.
point.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you've got to go back on.
Yes.
When the stress is there, you just got to remind yourself, hang on a minute, who brought me into this? You know, God put me here. God made this possible, and so I just stick with that. And sometimes that's all you got to hold you secure in that sort of thing. So, yeah, I know one of the areas I think is important in our life this day, with all the busyness and the fast pace. We're actually doing, as a staff together, a book by John Eldridge called Get Your Life Back. And one of the things that he stresses in this book is just to take a regular pause, just 60 seconds, where you just get out, you let everything go, you just hand it over to Jesus, and you just take that 1 minute pause to be still, know that he is God throughout the day. And as we've been practicing it as a staff, sounds almost new agey, but as we've just been saying, Jesus, I give you this, I give you that, and just getting by ourselves 60 seconds, we really notice the difference that makes in our life as well. So fantastic. I came across a particular clip on YouTube this week. It's all about fruitfulness during the hard times. So why don't you guys take a look at that now?
Hello, Father Rich Pagano here with you for the 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And I've got a story to share with you that I think would pretty much apply to any one of our lives. My first year in the major seminary, behind these big walls and big gates, I was struggling. I really felt like my freedom was restricted and I was being watched, everything that I did. I was sharing with the spiritual director of mine, Monsignor Basso, and as we were walking around the property, I was sharing with him what I was struggling with. I felt like I was completely held back, and I just felt really kind of imprisoned in a way. Do you feel imprisoned every now and then? I think it's a common experience for each one of us. Well, as I was walking with Monsignor Basso, I heard on the other side of the gate, and now it's like probably 11 o'clock at night, I hear, "Hey, man, I could talk to you." And I'm like, "You talking about me? I want to talk to you." So, okay. So I finished up with Monsignor Basso, and I went over and I began to speak to him. And this guy just got out of jail. And he and I spoke for probably about an hour and a half. And he told me, he said, in jail, I felt like I had all this freedom. I had a job, I had something to do, and now out here, I can't get a job. And he started sharing with me his difficulties. And here we were between the gate, locking arm in arm, and I felt like Jesus sent him to tell me that I could find freedom, even locked up in the seminary. The word seminary comes from the Latin word semen, which means seed. Seminary is a seed bed. But all of our vocations are seed beds. And in the scriptures this upcoming weekend, we hear that God gives seed to the one who sows. All throughout the scriptures, we have all these ideas of being watered, growth, being fertile, all of these fields and meadows, giving birth to new life. Well, this requires sacrifice and death. My brothers and sisters, that seed, planted in the darkness of the earth, pushed down, must then emerge through that shelling of the seed, and then emerge from the darkness to reach out to the sun. Growth sometimes is challenging, and sometimes we feel restricted within our vocations, within our marriages, our employment, wherever we may be. But when the Spirit of God is with us, it is a Spirit that advocates for us, strengthening us, helping us to persevere the process of these labor pains. So let's be fruitful. And as we look to the scriptures, let's realize that God is the one who is watering us, fertilizing us. You are that seed, and you are being planted precisely where you are right now, so that you may be an abundant harvest for the people that are around you.
Let me leave you with this scripture, and that for you to ponder, which is John 15, verse 1 to 5. It says, "I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Just something for you to think about this week. Prayer requests will be up on the screen after this episode. Please take the time to pray for those things in your Connect groups and at home. Thank you, Martin and Ros, again for coming and sharing with us and for your time and insight, and also for everything you do. We really appreciate that. And we will see you guys next time.